Welcome to our deep dive today, and we are going to be taking a look at Olof Palme,
Oh, yeah.
a Swedish prime minister, and we've got all kinds of materials,
Yeah.
academic articles, we've got firsthand accounts,
Yeah.
really going to give you, the listener, a good look at this sometimes controversial figure.
Yeah. What's so fascinating about Palm here is it's not just a Swedish story, it's global.
Yeah.
He was right there in the middle of the 20th century as things are changing.
Oh, yeah, the Cold War,
Yeah.
decolonization.
All of it.
He's right there front and center for so many of those pivotal moments.
Yeah.
But to get started, let's go back to his roots.
Okay.
This is a guy born into a wealthy family, but in 1951, he joins the Social Democratic Party,
Right.
which seems kind of unusual
It is unusual, yeah.
for someone from his background.
Yeah, and there are a couple explanations in the sources.
Okay.
One idea is that when he was younger, he traveled and saw all this poverty
Oh, wow.
and oppression around the world. You can imagine just seeing these inequalities firsthand. Maybe that's what led him to fight for social change.
That's almost like the classic hero's journey.
Yeah.
You go out, you see the world, you come back, and you're transformed.
That's right.
You've got this newfound sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other idea is that he really did believe in social justice,
Right.
the ideals of the Social Democrats,
Even though he didn't have to. He
Yeah.
had all this privilege.
Exactly. He could have just enjoyed it all.
Right, right.
But he felt like he had to work towards a more equal society.
Wow.
And if you look at his early speeches and writings,
Yeah.
you can see this commitment to social democracy. He's against colonialism,
Yeah.
against communism and fascism too.
So he's kind of forming his own path.
He is, yeah.
It's not one ideology or the other.
It's his own unique political identity, yeah.
Yeah. And he even described
Oh, yeah.
getting into politics as the joy of politics.
The joy of politics, yes.
It's about shaping society and making a difference.
Exactly. And you see that enthusiasm, that energy
Yeah.
in so much of what he did and said.
Yeah. He wasn't just doing it because it was a job.
No.
It was because he cared.
Right.
Yeah. So we have this young, idealistic Palme
Right.
wants to make a difference. And I think one of the things
Yeah.
he first becomes known for on the world stage is how much he criticized the Vietnam War.
Absolutely.
Ah.
And his condemnation of it, especially the U.S. bombing of Hanoi,
Yeah.
was just so powerful
Yeah.
and controversial.
Yeah.
He even compared the bombing to Guernica and Treblinka,
Oh, wow.
which really upset the U.S. government.
Yeah, I bet. And that really,
Oh, yeah.
he wasn't afraid to challenge a superpower,
No,
even though it could hurt Sweden's relationship with them.
it definitely did strain things,
Yeah.
but it also made him look like a fearless advocate for peace,
Yeah.
a critic of imperialism. And that
Yeah.
really resonated with people,
Yeah.
especially in Europe.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, he is this internationalist, this outspoken critic of war and injustice on the
Right.
world stage. But then when you look at what he's doing in Sweden,
Right.
you see this more pragmatic side to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the best examples is this debate about the wage earners funds.
Yeah.
This was a plan to slowly move ownership of companies from employers to workers.
So for people who don't know much about that,
Right.
what exactly were they?
So basically, they would create these funds,
Okay.
and they'd take a portion of company profits and use it to buy shares in the company.
Okay.
And over time, the funds would own more and more shares,
Right.
transferring ownership from private investors to workers.
That sounds pretty radical,
It was bold for sure.
especially for a country like Sweden.
It sparked a lot of debate.
Yeah.
Supporters thought it was a good way to make things more equal in terms of wealth and power.
Yeah.
But people who were against it thought it was a threat to private property
Right.
and a step towards socialism.
So where did Palm fall on this?
That's where the pragmatism comes in. He liked the general idea, but he thought it needed to be done slowly
Okay.
and with compromise.
He didn't want to rock the boat too much?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He knew that such a radical change could hurt the economy
Yeah.
and alienate important people.
Right.
So he tried to find a middle ground,
Okay.
something that would appease both sides.
Did that work?
Well, the sources we have don't really agree.
Oh, really?
Some say he compromised too much,
Okay.
but the final proposal wasn't really what he intended.
So they think he caved
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
to the pressure from business interests
Exactly.
and kind of abandoned his more radical ideas?
Yeah, but other sources say he was just being strategic,
Okay.
that he knew if he pushed too hard, it would fail completely.
So it's better to make some change
Right.
than risk getting nothing at all.
Exactly. It shows how tough it can be to be a leader
Yeah.
trying to balance your ideals
Yeah.
with the reality of what you can actually accomplish.
Yeah, he's constantly walking that tightrope
Right.
between idealism and pragmatism.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So let's move on then to one of his other big domestic policies, the third way.
The third way, yeah.
This is during his second government. This
Yeah.
was a pretty big shift
It was.
away from traditional social democratic policies, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was basically trying to find
Yeah.
like a middle ground between
Okay.
socialism and free market capitalism.
Yeah.
So, stimulating investment and production, but also keeping the welfare state strong.
So instead of like straight up nationalizing industries or strict price controls, it was more about making a good environment for businesses,
Exactly.
but making sure that that growth benefited everyone.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And,
Right.
it really did impact people's lives.
Yeah.
The third way led to more investment, more jobs, better living standards for a lot of Swedes.
I'm sure not everyone was happy about it though, right?
No, you're right. Some people thought he was moving away from the core principles of social democracy.
Yeah, it's almost like he was selling out a little bit.
Yeah, some critics felt like he was choosing the economy
Yeah.
over social justice.
Right, becoming more of a centrist than a
Yeah.
real socialist.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's this really interesting story that kind of shows this tension within his own government.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently when his finance minister, Kjell Olof Felt, suggested privatizing preschools,
Yeah.
Palme was totally against it.
Really?
And he even, like, right before his death,
Wow.
publicly reaffirmed his commitment to the public sector.
Huh. So even though he was open to some free market ideas,
Yeah,
he still believes some things should stay public.
exactly.
Gotcha.
Like essential services.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder,
Mhm.
was he really all in on the third way as a long-term solution?
Yeah.
Or was it more of a temporary fix
Right.
to deal with the problems of the time?
Kind of Band-Aid?
Yeah, like maybe he felt like it was a compromise he had to make. Right, keep the welfare state going
Yeah.
in a global economy that was constantly changing.
That's a good point.
It seems like he was always struggling
He was.
with how to make his ideals work
Right.
in the real world.
It's something that comes up again and again
Yeah,
in his career, both in Sweden and internationally.
yeah,
He had these strong beliefs,
yeah,
but he also knew how to negotiate.
right. And compromise to get things done.
Absolutely. And speaking of tough realities, we have to talk about his assassination.
Oh, yeah. 1986.
In 1986,
This is an event that shook Sweden to its core
it did.
and still fascinates people.
It really does. It's a reminder that even in peaceful countries,
Yeah.
terrible things can happen.
Yeah, can you imagine
Yeah.
Palme just walking home from the cinema with his wife
Right.
and then suddenly
Gunshots.
it's unbelievable.
It's tragic.
And the sources really talked about how shocked Sweden was.
They do.
So like they didn't just lose a leader, they
Right.
lost part of themselves.
Part of their identity. Yeah.
And the fact that it's never been solved
Right.
just makes it even more mysterious.
It really does. It's almost like
Yeah.
the lack of answers
Yeah.
reflects something about Palme himself.
Yeah.
He was so complex.
Yeah.
And that continues even after his death.
Right. It's like we're left with more questions than answers.
Exactly. And the sources explore all sorts of theories.
Yeah.
International conspiracies, domestic motives,
Yeah.
but none of them are conclusive.
It's like one biographer even ends their book
Yeah.
describing Palme's last moments,
Oh, wow.
and it just leaves you with this feeling of
Yeah.
loss
Sad.
and so many unanswered questions.
It really does.
Mm.
It's like his story was cut short
Yeah.
before it could really end.
And it shows how deeply this affected Sweden,
Yeah.
like a wound
Yeah.
that never fully healed.
A reminder of how fragile peace can be
Yeah.
and the shadow of violence that lingers.
Yeah. It's amazing how much Palme's assassination still resonates, even after all these years.
It really does. And I think that mystery that surrounds it,
Yeah.
kind of says something about Palme himself.
Oh, really?
Like he was hard to define when he was alive.
Right.
And it's the same even now.
Yeah, we saw how he could be so outspoken on the world stage,
Yeah.
condemning the Vietnam War. But then at home, he's making compromises.
Right.
He's working within the system.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and one biographer even called him
Yeah.
the most American of Swedish politicians,
Wow.
which is kind of funny when you think about it.
Right, because he clashed with U.S. foreign policy so much.
Exactly. It just
Yeah.
shows
Yeah.
how full of contradictions he was.
Yeah. But I think those contradictions are part of
Oh, yeah.
what makes him so interesting to study.
Yeah. And his legacy isn't just about, like, specific policies, like the third way or the wage earners funds.
Yeah.
It's something bigger.
What do you mean?
Well, it's about the challenges that social democracy faces in a globalized world.
Yeah.
How do you balance social justice with being competitive economically?
Yeah.
How do you keep a strong welfare state when the economy is always changing?
Yeah. Those are questions that a lot of countries are dealing with.
Absolutely they are.
Yeah.
And Palme's life, both his successes and his failures, they can teach us something about dealing with those challenges.
One thing that really struck me was how much he believed in dialogue.
Yeah.
Whether it was at the United Nations or negotiating with political opponents at home, he always thought communication was key.
He did. He was a great communicator.
Yeah.
And that's something we could all use a bit more of these days.
Especially now, yeah.
Yeah, with all the political division.
Right. It's easy to just stay in your own bubble and think anyone who disagrees with you is wrong.
But Palme showed us that real progress comes from listening to each other.
Even if you don't like what you hear.
Exactly. You got to try to understand where the other side is coming from.
And find that common ground.
Absolutely. And it makes me think about his assassination.
Yeah.
How it's often seen as this act of political violence.
Right.
It's a reminder of how dangerous hate and extremism can be.
Yeah. But it also shows how important it is to fight those things. With dialogue.
Exactly.
With understanding.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Olof Palme, I think what we've learned is that his story is about more than just Swedish politics. It's about the challenges that all democracies face, about the importance of talking to each other.
Absolutely.
And the complexities of leadership,
especially
in a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah. And it's a story that still matters today.
Oh, yeah.
It gives us insights that are just as relevant now as they were back then.
So to everyone listening out there, take some time to think about Palme's legacy.
Yeah.
About the things he had to deal with, the choices he made, and the impact he had on Sweden and the world.
And think about what we can learn from him.
Right. What lessons can we take and use to face the challenges we have today?
There's no easy answer, but just thinking about these questions, wrestling with the complexities of his story, that's valuable in itself.
Right.
It reminds us that history isn't just dates and facts. It's about people, their choices.
And the consequences of those choices.
Exactly.
And that's something we're all a part of.
Absolutely.
We're all making history every day.
Keep exploring. Keep asking questions.
Keep digging deeper.
There's always more to discover.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.